Okay, I'll try to send an email. Can you share your email? I'll find your email.
Yes, I'm pretty easy to find.
Based on my interests, I have a conflict. Like there is in information-centric networking research group and quantum networking working
Okay,
group.
but I don't want to cut you off, but let's talk about it in an email offline and not take the working group chair's time on this stuff, okay?
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you very much, Adrian. No problem. Thank you very much for allocating time for me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Working Group Chairs Forum at louder. Okay. So I'd like to welcome you to the Working Group Chairs Forum at IETF 119. We have a fairly full agenda today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Please feel free to grab your lunches, and please don't forget to take your lunches and your garbage with you when you leave. This is an official IETF meeting. This is a note well, and all of you have agreed to participate by it. Our general admin notes for this meeting are we will be doing draft minutes in the online notes tool. I know it says EODIR. That's just the way we fit into the current structure. So please, you can click on the notes link in the agenda and it'll get you to where you need to be. Please be clear, concise, and respectful and act according to our code of conduct. Our agenda for today, I've got a last minute kind of short tweak, but we do have a fairly full agenda. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Are there any further, we're going to move Francesca and Mark up and the outreach down one. So we're just going to swap those two. Any other agenda bashes? Anything else I assume can show up in any other business? Okay. So with that, Mark or Francesca?
Okay. Hello. My name is Mark Nottingham. I chair the HTTP working group, and I am also the, what do you call it? Lead person who is stuck with things for the HTTP Directorate. What is it, Francesca? Secretary. Sure. Secretary. So I would not dream of ever implying that your authors and your editors and your working groups are not completely across every aspect of the stack of specifications and protocols we understand to be the internet now. But once in a while, there are nuances that maybe don't quite get through. And so recently we established the HTTP Directorate to help review documents that use HTTP in their protocols. And that's because we're finding that a lot of working groups are now using HTTP as what is sometimes called substrate protocol. So instead of building their own new protocol directly on IP or TCP or QUIC these days, they'll reuse HTTP. And there are certain things that can cause issues in that. And so we have the directorate. It's very easy to find information about us. If you go to HTTP Working Group or httpwg.org, and you click on the bottom link in the middle, HTTP Directorate, click, thank you. There's some information here. And so as you can see, we're trying to assure that your proposal is deployable with existing implementations and infrastructure. Sometimes there's some aspects of that aren't obvious. Highlight ways that you can get more value out of using HTTP in your proposal. Work with the authors to make sure that best practices are followed, and verify that it doesn't actually harm the HTTP ecosystem unintentionally. And so there's some advice there of how you can engage with us. To be very clear, because this sometimes it happens in some communities, we're not here to be religious about REST or anything like that. We just want to get you to make sure that you're aligned with the protocol and getting value out of it. So we point you to things like BCP 56. We have an editorial style guide for how to refer to the protocol, and some other recommendations. Please be aware of this. If you have drafts that are using HTTP, we encourage early reviews. That's a lot easier to incorporate this advice very early in the process. We're watching the 0 drafts as they go by to see if they're using HTTP, but we might miss it. So if you have a draft that is using HTTP, please engage with us, and we'll be very happy to give feedback and guidance and talk to your authors. That's all I've got. Any questions?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, one quick question. Is it possible to request, is the directorate tied into the data tracker yet? Do you know?
Oh, very much so, yes. And so, yeah, as chairs, putting those hats on, you can go into the tools and request a review from the directorate directly in your draft data tracker page, I believe. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. So next we have Outreach.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dhruv. I'm part of the EODIR, one of the co-chairs with Karen and Greg, and I'll be talking about outreach today. Next slide, please. So just a quick update, of course, the O in EODIR is outreach, and we focus on coordinating various outreach activities that we could take by folks like you and other individuals as well. Most of this material is maintained at a wiki, so do check it out. And we try to consolidate various materials, experiences, maybe even provide initial set of information from our side that can be used when you are talking about IETF at other external bodies. Our aim is at EODIR, especially for looking for potential new IETF participants. We need to continue to grow, bring in new folks into IETF, join them mailing list, etc. So that's what we do at EODIR. So do check out the wiki. Next slide. I just wanted to highlight some of the few outreach activities that we have tracked and coordinated at EODIR. The one that you see on top is a recent one in India at one of the universities. Some of those students are here at this IETF as well, and they have presented in some of your working groups and research groups as well. So that was pretty good. We did a nice little workshop before where I talked about how to participate at IETF, what happened in the recent events, what are the tips, things like that. Recently, there was also one at Apricot and APNEC. This was in Bangkok 2 weeks back. Again, we did a IETF roundup trying to give inputs to operators, like for instance, things like, oh, we have a new area, it's wet area, you won't see transport. That doesn't mean transport disappeared. It's part of this. Things like keeping external communities aware of what are the things that are happening at IETF and keeping them engaged, especially related to operator-related topics, like for instance, creating of a new working group called NMOBs and what's happening there and what's our agenda, things like that. And similarly, we did it for internet governance students at NetMission, that Lars did for high-level internet governance expert group. So things like that. So we would like to track this in our wiki much better. And these are some of the things that we are aware of. Our aim coming to this working group chair forum is, next slide, so that I can directly go to my ask, is make sure that we are tracking the right things, especially working group and research group chairs do outreach about their working group. That's very common. For instance, in MPLS, folks going to MPLS forum and other places. So we want to know, how do we track that? We want to track that in our wiki as well. So give us feedback. And if you are aware of these kind of activities, how can we help? Like our focus at EODR is not to do all the outreach ourselves, but we rely on our community. We want to make it easy for people to do this activity, connect them with the right folks within the IETF community, and provide as much materials as we can. So if you have any suggestions, we are happy to listen now or reach out to us on our mailing list.
Any questions now?
Thank you.
Wait, oh, sorry.
Hi, Justin Richer, newly minted chair of Whimsy. And one of the big things about our group is that there's We know there's a large existing community in a different organization. Do you guys have resources and experience for helping us like try to plug the communities together? Because there are people working on very key technologies that Whimsy is going to be dealing with, but those technologies are not moving into the IETF. So this is something that I think that we could use some help coordinating. Can we get some help?
Yeah, of course. So let's talk afterwards and see how we can help where other working groups and research groups have faced similar problems in the past. So that's where this group can also provide us good input, so we can continue to do that discussion in even the working group chairs list and see how to do this better.
Yeah.
All right.
I think one of the keys is that we want to know what resources are needed. And so if you find a gap in like slides or information or something that would be useful to you, if you could identify that, then we might be able to get it developed.
That would be great. Thank you. But yeah, we'll I think we'll drop in an email to the EODIR email and we'll go from there. So thank you guys.
Thanks. Okay. It's you. You are on.
Click or shall I ask you?
Can you just do it because I forgot to click again?
Okay, so I'll ask you again.
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Jay Daly. I'm the IETF Executive Director. I'm going to be talking about some IESG work on working group chairs. I know it's a little bit odd having me talk about it rather than the IESG. I'll explain that as we go through a bit. Next slide, please. So the IESG, largely initiated by the outgoing chair, has asked the LLC to support its work on working group chairs. Now, there are some things we know about working group chairs. Working group chairs are a key part of the IETF, and many individual working group chairs are major contributors to the IETF. We know that working group chairs are formally managed by their respective ADs, and that's an important part of the AD role. There is some loose self-management of working group chairs. This forum effectively is it, and there is the working group chairs mailing list for helping each other. We have an ongoing training program that's been going for a while. That's the LLC basically coordinates. It develops the content in coordination with the IESG, EODIR working group chairs, and then sets up an annual training program. And there's also the wiki set up chairs.ietf.org as a central resource for working group chairs. Now, while this overall works well, there are some problems that need reviewing that the LLC was asked to look at. Next slide, please. So first things first is the demographics about working group chairs is relatively limited. So I'm going to present some demographics that we have, but this really is, it may seem slightly distortionary what I'm explaining, but that's because we have a very limited set of data. So I can't go and give you other things such as like breakdown by gender or breakdown by age or something, because we don't have that, okay? So this is simply the number of chairs by the time in post using data tracker, using data from December 2023. And we've had at least 6 or 7 changes since then. So as you can see, data tracker only knows whether you've been a chair going back 12 years. You may have been a chair 18 years, and we don't know any difference between that and 12 years. So we know that there are 26 chairs who have been in post for at least 12 years. So we have this breakdown of how long people have been in post. Next slide, please. And we can do the same thing by area, and this is pre-WIT, so we don't have the breakdown yet for that. But you can see that there are different approaches taken here within the different areas about this, and that generally all of the areas have some people who have been there a very long time. But for example, INT in particular, as a proportion of the number of people, a number of chairs has those who have been there longer than most. Next slide, please.
Do you want questions as we go? Or?
Yeah, Leslie, is it relevant to what I'm talking about now?
Thanks. It's actually a clarifying question. Leslie Daigle, when you say time in post, do you mean in current working group chair role or a working group chair role?
As far as I know, it is contiguous service as a working group chair. Okay, so we don't have the correct data that I need to yet. It hasn't been modeled in Data Tracker previously in a way for us to be able to get it, but it will be modeled for future. Next slide, please. And here's just the working groups by the number of chairs. So as we know, some working groups have 3 chairs, some have, majority have 2, and some have 1. Just to give us an idea that that some of them use this slightly differently. And there's not meant to be any judgment here. This is simply just data for you. Next slide, please. And then the number of working groups that each person chairs. So we have 154 people who chair just 1, 90 people who chair 2, 30 people who chair 3, and 16 people who chair 4. Okay, all right, just so you have that. And as I said, this is December 2023. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about 3 things now. I'm going to talk about part 1, which is the skills development framework, which is stuff that's ongoing. Part 2 is stuff that the IESG is almost there on. And part 3 is stuff that is simply being discussed and no decisions or anything's made about at all. So the skills development framework, the problems that we have, and we know this is from interviews, informal conversations, posting to working group chairs and things, is that the knowledge and skills is uneven across the set, across the cohort of working group chairs. There is, we don't have a baseline understanding of responsibilities and standard practices. We can't say for certain everybody knows this baseline, in that way. And that there are working group chairs are often left in the unenviable position of discovering on their own what tasks they need to do, how to complete them, and sometimes creating their own tools and information to do this because they're not aware that there are already other resources that do that. And then there are different practices across working groups. Now, some people describe this as a problem, that it has different experiences for working group participants and, in extreme cases, practices that may not meet requirements. Others actually think that this is can be a benefit. It's that we have different practices. Okay, so next slide, please. So the actions that are underway, and this has been going on for some time, is that there is a work is trying to work out what skills working group chairs need to have and be trained on. And this is largely being driven by working group chairs. It's not being imposed externally. And that they're ensuring that all the key subjects are covered by an online training course, both live and on demand. And we're cycling through those, each year. We are investigating some form of individual learning tracker and possibly self-assessment tool just to help you navigate that type of skill stuff, but this is already underway and already being developed. And as noted at the bottom, there's no requirement for any working group chair to undertake any of this training. This is all being offered voluntarily. So next slide, please. So part 2, and this is under active consideration. Okay, this is the general thing here is about informed decision making. The IESG has very little data on working group chairs, and that's hampering multiple things related to planning. The work that the IESG has to do with chairs sometimes can be a very large level of work, and if there's better data that is able to help plan that, then that's to an advantage. So at the individual working group chair level, the IESG doesn't know key data, such as how working group participants rate a chair, for example, one of those things. How do the chairs rate themselves? What support the chairs think they need? That sort of stuff. Now, ADs receive direct feedback when there's a problem, and sometimes direct feedback when things are going well, but better data would just help with this. Rather than sometimes things being a crisis, if data is there, then you can plan for things much better. And then at the cohort level, there's a lot the IESG doesn't know. Basic demographic breakdown. We don't know gender breakdown of chairs, for example. We don't know age breakdown. We don't know all sorts of things. We don't know role data such as the turnover rate. And as Leslie asked, some of our data about how long people have been chairs is a little bit dubious as well. The IETF community survey gives some of that, just a little bit of an overall feel of that, but really doesn't give that much about it. And as noted, that data tracker needs some amendment to be able to store some of the role data. Next slide, please. So the actions that are being considered there is basically a survey. That's number 2 there, an annual survey of each working group with questions, possibly about the chairs. This isn't going to happen without your engagement and things, but this is something that is being considered. And that will replace the questions in the IETF community survey covering the same things. Improving the data model in data tracker so that we can record better things about chairs. An annual survey of working group chairs to get demographic data and self-perceptions, needs, support requirements, that sort of stuff. And then something like an annual report or a dashboard about that so that we can, give some cohort level data shared that. Okay, next slide, please. So part 3, this is entirely under discussion, no decisions, no, this is simply just things that are being talked about and thought about. And in the general area of chairing opportunities. So, ADs report that there is a general paucity of suitable candidates for a chair role when a new chair role comes up. And this can make finding a replacement working group chair a difficult and stressful process, particularly if it needs to be done quickly. It requires considerable effort by area directors, both to encourage candidates and to assess candidate suitability. Forcibly removing a long-standing working group chair is a big issue. It creates personal rancor, significant reaction from those in the community. It's a big thing. It's a very, very big thing. The lack of opportunities for people to put their names forward as a working group chair risks people not preparing for such opportunities. It means that there may not be the pool of suitably prepared candidates ready if people think there isn't an opportunity coming up. And the IETF risks being seen as a members club, where those who've been here the longest control the organisation, though the opposite side to that is that this prevents capture by a coordinated group of newcomers. So this isn't intended to be, judgmental, simply, hopefully, it's just trying to state the problems and risks. Next slide, please. And so continuing on the problems and risks, when a chair opportunity arises, there's a risk that a group of participants promoting a particular technology or approach band together to push for a candidate favourable to their cause. That's a known issue. The working group chair role is sufficiently time consuming and difficult that, if we were to do something such as require any form of assessment or reapplication process, good chairs might go, oh no, this is a good excuse for me to step down. Thank you very much. This is such a busy job to do. And we wouldn't want to lose good chairs in that way. The strong reaction to removing long-standing chairs risks people thinking, oh, well, I won't do that then, just put that to the side and leave that for later. Saying no to a candidate for a working group chair, people have reported, can sometimes cause personal issues. And there's a threat that if we overdo all of this, the training and the other things, that we create a class of professional working group chairs who are great at chairing, well-trained with good experience, who just rotate from working group to working group to working group, in that type of way. As I said, this is simply just a discussion thing, and all I've been asked to do is come back and explain and pass all of this on to you, as I've been basically doing the management consulting work, behind some of this sort of stuff in that way, okay?
So,
I think we've got some questions now.
yeah, we do. Go ahead, Sue. Susan, you're up.
Susan?
Susan Harris, IDR Chair. Wonderful presentation. Really enjoyed it. How do we make good feedback for you and comments?
So anything you say here, I will try to pass on, but there are a number of ADs here and you can talk directly to the IESG as well. I don't have to be the gatekeeper for what's passed on, but I will try to summarise and make sure anything's passed on.
It's quite a lot of down in the weeds detail on what you're measuring and how you're measuring it and in your things. So I thought it was best to be offline.
Yeah.
So if you would send out how I can contribute positively.
I would say write that down and send that to IESG then, directly to IESG, yeah.
Directly to
Yes,
IESG.
direct to IESG.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, great, thank you, yeah.
Spencer?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Jay, for being there. One thing that I've seen talked about, but I'm not sure if I saw on the list here, and you were going through at a pretty good clip, was so maybe it is there, but the situation where a long-serving chair is not able to fulfill the role for some significant period of time, and then you find out that the person was placed as chair by somebody 4 area directors back in the succession, and that nobody's ever really asked them to confirm their willingness to continue. So that I'm probably bringing that up not as a some of this stuff could be not really as heavy-handed as some people think of it being, but just the suggestion that it would be good for area directors to periodically ask chairs every few years if they are willing to continue, so that chairs, the ADs have an idea what chair vacancies are likely to arise in a somewhat predictable time frame. Thanks.
Thank you.
Carson?
Carsten Bormann, thank you. That was a pretty good presentation. One thing that wasn't mentioned here is that most working groups are chaired by teams and teams of working group chairs. And turns out that the people in those teams have very different roles in many cases, because they have different strengths. And the chairpersonship of that working group often is only works because these strengths and different approaches combine. So that's maybe something that needs to be considered here. So it's an old adage that we usually combine an experienced chair with a newbie chair so they can teach and disrupt each other, which is really great, but sometimes it's more complicated. So I think that it would be good to capture this somehow. I have no suggestion how to do that.
No, thank you. That's an important point. Thank you.
Pete?
A couple of things, and the statistics that you've got already are a bummer enough that I'm glad that the IESG is doing this, that this is important stuff. Can I suggest adding survey stuff that might capture who is available to do chairing, who is not doing it yet? So you've been talking about surveying leadership and surveying participants about leadership, but finding new leadership is hard, as you've mentioned, and that would be something good. I'm bummed at how few people showed up for trainings that happened. I think it's really important to do so. By way of encouraging that, the working group chairs can get a lot out of those trainings, I really believe, but the trainings can also get a lot out of the working group chairs. And setting up some way to get that input in the other direction will encourage some of us who like to hear ourselves talk actually attend, so they can provide feedback about the trainings and all of the important things that they know that other chairs should know. And having some more formal tools to get that feedback might encourage more people to show up.
Okay, thank you. I think that is built into the training process, but I don't know the details well enough to be able to answer that. Greg, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, Greg would. Definitely one of the things that we learned out of the first round of training several years ago is that the most valuable thing participants found, one of the most valuable things participants found, was the knowledge sharing. So to your point, Pete, definitely something we look forward to highlighting in future trainings.
Okay, David?
I wanted to just double down on like some of what Pete was saying, about the, the value of training and having a way to have maybe a registered pool of prospective working group chairs. But I think if we were able to have some kind of learning management, solution where prospective chairs could demonstrate that they've received some training about a chair versus those that haven't, that could actually be a good way to gauge an individual's eagerness or ability to maybe jump into that role. I know within my organization, within my home organization, there's a number of people who I've encouraged to be working group chairs, and it's been a bit of a challenge to get them sort of involved in that way, not because of a lack of interest, but more because of a lack of finding the right working groups, for them to get involved in. And so, having a sign up, I think, is really important from that perspective. I think another thing that isn't recognized here is the mentoring role that existing chairs have with helping to train up new chairs within a working group. It's something that I'm doing right now, for a new chair. I think that's really important to recognize here as well, because I think it's common practice to pair, junior chairs with a more experienced chair as a matter of practice.
Great, thank you, David.
Bron Gondwana, I am one of those obnoxious 16 people who has 4 working groups. Hopefully one of them will close very soon. This is a service role, and as a working group chair, it's all about helping your group achieve what it's trying to achieve. But also for a lot of people, I think it's something that helps them in the rest of their life. You learn skills here, which is great. I wonder if there's some value in making it easier for people to put this on their resume, that they have been a working group chair, and hence make it something that's valuable for people in their career as well, if we want to use that as a way to encourage more people. I'm really keen on the survey. I think as somebody who's taking on a role like this, you need to get feedback from your groups, ideally anonymous feedback, as well as direct feedback, so that you can hear how things are going. And I think as a group, we have to be willing to listen to that feedback and work with it.
Great, thank you, Bron.
Paul Hoffman. What Dave Waltemar said is very important. I think the easiest thing to do if you want a new thing is to prepare a new session class, a 1 hour, so you might want to become a working group chair. Anyone who goes through that then should be able to get at all of the chair materials. And then somebody might say to the AD, I really want to be a chair. And by the way, I've already prepped. I think that that's the easiest thing.
So this year, we opened up our working group chairs training to potential chairs or people interested in chairing.
But I think you might need a little bit of a beginning one,
yes, I agree with you,
ahead of that. But like a 1 hour one's fine.
Yeah.
What I'm about to say now, I think is going to be really unpopular with the ISG, but it's super important. It's okay to open a new working group with 2 novice chairs. We're not going to get enough new working group chairs if they always try to pair a novice with an experienced one. I've hit that this week. I'm chairing a BOF, for which I'm not going to be a working group chair, talking to people. There is an expectation that you're only going to get 1 novice. I don't think that that's healthy. I know that means a bit more work for the ADs, and maybe they can offload that in a mentorship thing to somebody else. But if we want to increase the numbers, you can't increase them just 1 at a time, because we don't open up that many new working groups. You really can increase them 2 at a time.
Thank you.
Jeff Haas. First thing, your statistics have some interesting bumps in them. Like I've been chair of BFD for almost 20 years now. The working group has met maybe 10 times. There are working groups that I think if you actually changed your statistics to see how active the working group is versus the chair length, you may actually find some of your data settles out a little bit. But working to the data and the survey that has been going around, and I'll be talking a little bit about one of the observations of that later. The length of the chairs also roughly corresponds with the length of the life of the working groups. So you're getting, especially for long-lived working groups, people that are the chairs that have been around long enough to actually provide wisdom, steering, et cetera, that we want out of a chair. So in terms of just that sort of correlation, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but all the stuff that's in the presentation here is very good. How do we actually grow new people? How do we shuffle the leadership along? One of the things I think that would be very helpful, and this is just a standard HR type thing, the pool of people that are the IETF participants are not necessarily the pool of people that want to run working groups. They don't necessarily want to do anything more than write drafts. So not only do you need to survey the chairs, which is a wonderful thing, one of the things that should be on there besides what size t-shirt you want is, do you want to participate in leadership? Do you want to actually help with various things? Instead of begging people for help on the mailing lists, use the tools that we have as part of participating in IETF to say, what type of participation would you like to do? And then help grow people into that.
Yeah, fully agree.
Donald Lee Slake, Future Way. Relevant to having two novice chairs. Presumably the problem with that would be the excessive drain on the AD. The AD is certainly capable of providing excellent, well-experienced advice on process and so on, and how to be a chair and things. But that's they're usually at the working group meeting. So for physical meetings, that may be practical. But the chairs need perhaps some more continuing source of advice. So I would just a thought, as there are technical advisors appointed to some working groups, maybe there should be a process advisor that could be appointed for a working group to unburden the AD from the stream of questions from novice working group chairs.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan Lennox, I just had a question. You mentioned that you opened up the chairs training to non-current chairs. I'm wondering if you know how many non-chairs actually came to that and if there have been any.
I'm looking at my colleague who's got a mouthful of food.
Yeah, Greg Wood again. Again, as Pete mentioned, the numbers were pretty low overall, unfortunately. But we haven't broken out the specific chair, non-chair, what we can do.
Okay. Did you want your last two slides?
Do I have two more slides?
Yeah, you do.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Nothing's happening. And the next one was a thank you. So
Thank you.
no,
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you can stay right there because you're next.
Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about the IETF community survey. If you think that last presentation was fast, you're in for it. No, so we have the draft report out about the IETF community survey. Next slide, please. A presentation here cannot replace the reading the report. This is just to give you an indication of some of the things that are in there so that you may feel motivated to either read it or comment on it or try to steer the direction of what it says. It's intentionally a draft report because it makes a number of key findings based on the data, and this is something that the community needs to possibly adjust before then the final report goes out. So there are 3 goals for this survey. So this is the 3rd annual survey. 3 goals: size and demographic breakdown of the IETF community, data to inform the IETF community and those in leadership roles, about what are the issues and possibly what are not issues, and then a time series of data that can be used to assess the natural changes affecting the IETF and the effectiveness of any change programs and things going on. Next slide, please. So this one ran from December to January. It is sent directly to every email address subscribed to an IETF mailing list, unless they've opted out of a previous survey, of which only a few hundred have. And so it goes to 49,000 working email addresses and gets back about 2,000 response. It goes through a data cleaning bit. There are bots who answer. There are people who deliberately just say yes to everything, and so we have to go through a cleaning exercise. 1,812 used, and so that's a margin of error of plus or minus 2.26%. Next slide, please. So some demographics. There are a lot more charts about the demographics in the report. Next slide, please. So we start off this survey in a new way by asking people to choose one of these categories for themselves. They are, a regular participant, an occasional participant. They are just a reader, lurker, read but never post. There's somebody who monitors message subjects and occasionally reads but never posts. And ex-participant, new participant, which obviously is a relatively loose thing, and non-participants. Anybody who answers a non-participant is then said, thank you very much, and doesn't participate in the rest of the survey, which is another reason why we have a difference between the number who give us things and the number we actually use. Next slide, please. So geography. This is our geography. People can only choose one region, and this is the breakdown of it by participant type and normalized by that participant type. So what we can see, as I think we all expect, is that Europe and North America dominate there, both of them on approximately 40%. This tallies well with what we see from post-meeting surveys, and Asia on 11.5% roughly. If we look at regular participants, we have a slight shift there with fewer from Europe and more from North America. And if we look at new participants, we have a distinct shift there, where we have many more coming from Europe and more from Asia, and much fewer from North America. So it's just giving us an idea possibly of changing regional demographics. I'll talk more about regions, like the other regions, a little bit later on. Next slide, please. Age. So we have, a textbook normal distribution here of age, showing people slightly younger than me in the middle of the thing, I believe. Again, if we look at the regular column there, the regular participant column, we see a very similar distribution. If we look over at the new participant column, I mean, it's not surprising, really. Younger people are joining on average much more. So, which is a clear indication of the way things are going in the future, I think. Next slide, please. If we look at gender now, gender is asked differently from these other questions. The question allows people to check all that apply of those choices: man, woman, non-binary, transgender, and other. And if they choose prefer not to answer, then that's the only choice. And then, so we then have that normalized by the participant type below. And so, as you can see, we still have a very low representation of women compared to women in the general population, of 50% of the planet, as you know. That is slightly higher in new participants than it is in regular participants, certainly. Next slide, please. And then these are some new questions that we're trying to get a little bit more at. So we're asking people, what's your employment status, and also asking them to check all that apply. I'm not going to explain the three different columns at the top, but these are different ways of measuring this so that it gives you a different idea. So we can see that most people that come are employees, then independent contractors, business owners, retired, and student, have a relatively clear spread there. And if you look again at new, many more students, as we can see over there, and far fewer independent contractors as well, which is an interesting point. Next slide, please. So we then add on top of the employment to our separate question, what sectors do you work in? And we have these ones here: business, academia, civil society, not-for-profit, government, and none of the above. We have a sufficiently large none of the above that I need to, next time we do this, try to explore that a bit more, I think. So next slide. So that now gives us this lovely chart. So this is the employment, type of employment by the sector. So for those of you who can see the colors, the dark blue ones are all business. The big box on the left are all employees. So we can see how employees split up amongst business, civil society, government, and other things. And then we can then see the other types of employment by sector. Next slide, please. Right, so now we're going to go on to some key findings. And these are the bits really where as much feedback as possible is very helpful. And this is an abridged version that misses some of the nuances. Next slide, please. So the first statement here, key finding, is that the IETF is good at delivering its mission and principles, but could do much better. So if we look at The IETF produces high quality RFCs. The middle column is something called a coding mean, where we apply a score from 1 to 5, from the almost never through to almost always, and take the mean of that. Anything over 4 is good. And so that's those are, can't remember if it's good or excellent. Those are good scores anyway. Very good scores for high quality RFCs, open and transparent manner, reflect consensus, relevant RFCs. Those are all great scores. Okay. If we look down at the bottom though, about the timely manner, poor score, and that is repeated throughout this, the entire survey. Is timeliness is the other one. And there's another big thing that goes throughout, which is about processes and about people's views on what's important and what isn't important. Thank you. Next slide, please. And the IETF is considered a very important organisation that outperforms its peers in all respects. This is astonishing, right? So first of all, how important is it? We do a net promoter score mechanism. So you give it a scale of 1 to 10. If you select 9 or 10, then you are a promoter. If you select, can't remember, 1, 2 or 3 or something, you're a detractor, and everything else is a passive in the middle. And so we have a promoter score of 63 and we have a detractor score of 7. You deduct 1 from the other. So we're well over 55 there. That's a fantastic net positive, net promoter score. People really think we are an extremely important organisation. Next slide, please. So we then asked this question, how well do you think the IETF compares to other standard setting organisations for the following aspects? If the middle column is above 3, then that means the IETF is rated better than other organisations, okay? 3 is the neutral, about the same. So as you can see, it rates better on every score. It rates better overall. It's not a lot better in some cases, but little things down the bottom, like behaviour of other participants, it rates better, for example. And at the top, the openness of the standards from this process, of course. Now, none of those are very strong scores in terms of rating better, but it's still noticeable that it rates better. Next slide, please. So there's a new question as well. Participation is driven by personal interest and a specific technology generally, not business or employer goals. So how important to you are the following reasons for participating? My personal interest, make the internet work better, keep up to date in my professional development, all at the top. Down the bottom, to bring in new business or find a new employer is really low, and to represent my employer stroke clients is fairly low as well. So it is a personally motivated bit. I'm not going to show you the bit about specific technology, but there is data there that shows that as well, which means that some people sometimes believe that people come to the IETF because it's a thing they want to come to, and they look around trying to find something of interest. The data actually shows they don't do that. They come because there's a specific thing they know about already and then work out the IETF around it. Next slide, please. The IETF still has a problem with gender diversity, but there are signs of improvement. So if we look at, in particular, the second line, I am treated the same as the rest of the IETF community, we see quite a divergence between men and women there. For non-binary and transgender people, the numbers of people who replied, the absolute number is too low generally for this to be reliable data. Okay. So next slide, please. Now, participation is dominated by people from 2 regions. We saw that at the beginning, North America and Europe. And there are multiple factors behind that. Skill in English is one of them. We see a distinct difference about English here for Asia and Latin America. We have a notable thing about understanding the IETF well enough. And then we have this odd thing about feeling part of the IETF community, which is potentially not a cause, it's an effect of part of other things. Next slide, please. Now, there is a problem with behaviour, but it is hard to pin down. This is probably almost the only one of the few places it appears. If I go back to that question I asked earlier about how the IETF compares to other standard setting organisations, and we break it down by the type of participant, then regular participants score it lower than other SDOs. Okay, so which, you know, and they should know best, shouldn't they, really, you know, of the regular participants. So there is a problem there. It's just getting to it is the awkward bit. Right, next slide, please. New participants need to learn a lot to be effective, and without that can feel excluded. So what hinders you from deterring or participating in the IETF? This is a new question as well. The cost of participating and the complexity of IETF processes, you know, very much so. Interestingly, the behaviour of other IETF participants is there, but it's not the same on the same level as the others there, you know, as a hindrance. Email, by the way, is just a religion across everything. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, next slide, please. Here we go. Email is still universally preferred. Every single way I try to break down what people think about email, everybody loves it, honestly, whether it's by age, whether it's by type of participant, whether it is by gender, whatever, it doesn't matter. People love email. And if you have a look here, by the 18 to 24 year group for email, even their preference is higher than their preference for any of the other ways of participating in the IETF, okay? It's a...
To be clear, that doesn't mean they like email.
No, this is their preference. It's their preferred way, yeah? Yeah, that's absolutely true. That is, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's a tight cluster there. And what I think this tells us a bit as well. If you look at the younger people, they tend to like everything. So what we're going to see happen is not so much that email is going to go down, but younger people want to use all of these channels as appropriate for different things. So we're not going to see one thing replaced with another. We're going to see, you know, a multiplicity of things. Okay. Yep. Next slide, please.
Do you
I'm
want
almost
the queue?
done, so we'll go into the...
Do you want David in the queue?
Well, I'm almost done. So
okay,
David's
we'll finish and then
we'll
get to you,
yeah,
David.
Okay. Right. I thought there was one more, but apparently not. Right.
Did we miss one?
Sorry, questions, David.
No, yeah.
The previous slide about the email, is that confirmation bias that we're seeing there, since, you know, email is the primary way we do work?
Well, I'm not sure it is necessarily. It is the primary way we do work, but we do lots of work in lots of other ways. This question is double checked in 3 different questions to understand how people think about this. I'm only showing one of them here. If, you know, yeah, it does seem to be the way that people just prefer it. It's, when I speak to younger people about this, they regard email as a specific tool used for a specific type of thing here, and they would never consider it in anything outside of an environment like this in the way that some of us older people might do. But within that framework, they're comfortable with it. But I'm generalizing a little bit there, but it does seem to be not confirmation bias.
Yeah, thank you.
Ron? If everybody can be pretty quick, we're short on time.
How happy are we with the percentage of people answering this survey? I'm wondering, we're very open to participation. It's very easy to participate in the IETF. It feels like maybe a gatekeeping that is, you must answer this survey once per year is a reasonable thing to expect for participation in the IETF at all. Even if the answer is just to go into it and say, I'm still involved in the IETF, I don't want to answer this.
Okay, I'll pass that on to the IESG. I'm not going to go anywhere near that decision. Thank you.
Hoffman, I'm totally surprised by the 4th line remote at an IETF meeting. That's a tight cluster. It's way higher than I would have expected. Next time, can you ask about virtual interims? Because sure. My takeaway from that is, therefore, virtual interims might also be really popular.
Sure, yeah.
Yep,
I do. The one thing I do struggle with is virtual interim is such a poor phrase for us to use unless you really understand the IETF. So I need to find some way to undo that, but yes, certainly.
Adrian?
Jay, it's Adrian. Thank you for doing this work and for your presentation. Can I remind you, please, to go and read the chat, because there's a lot of snark, but there's also some useful stuff for you.
Okay, thank you. I'll read the edited version. Lovely. Right, we're done?
Yeah, we're done with. Thanks, Jay. All right, we have one more, and we have two more, but it's going to be really quick.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Jeff Haas. I do BFD and IDR. I'm also one of these nerds that enjoy reading surveys. So thank you, Jay. This was actually a good follow-on. So next slide, please. So part of what I noted while I was flipping through the slides overlaps some stuff that I do as part of my charter at work. We have customers that, I work at Juniper Networks. We have people that want to actually get involved with IETF to advance, things they're doing. So myself and a few other of the IETF participants, make a habit of actually sort of providing IETF 101 type experiences. And some of our findings for interacting with people trying to onboard them overlaps a couple of interesting points that we've seen out of the survey and some of the recent stuff. Well, the first one being that we just announced that we're decommissioning the DAO of IETF. It's gotten stale. The stuff that's in the document is all worth reading. If you've ever read the DAO, read why the DAO is going away. It's actually a useful thing, and it actually feeds into the stuff that the survey covers. But the sort of negative thing about that is it was at one point a central place you could go to of, this is what IETF sort of looks like. Here's a sense of how it goes. And the one side, the one entry point to get the job done was very useful. We have had a huge amount of work done on the website. Thank you to everybody that's actually done that work. I certainly could provide better feedback myself. And I believe we've had calls from the EODIR to actually spend some time looking at the content and fleshing it out. Unfortunately, one of the problems with website type activities is they're not intended to be single point of contact for all this stuff. It's just literally a web of stuff. Web pages are subject to rot. They're hard to maintain versus each other. So a lot of the criticisms about why the DAO got decommissioned is going to sort of, as a self-fulfilling prophecy, happen on the website eventually. This requires actual maintenance to make sure that we don't do that. Next slide, please. So the one that sort of caught my attention as part of the headaches I have with onboarding is, what keeps you from participating in the IETF? What's the hard thing for you? And complexity, especially by age group, was the thing that popped up. And that was the single point that we hit over and over again during our 101s. Not the, what's a draft? Here's an email list, offer your opinions. These are all easy things. It's literally, how does the pipeline of IETF work? How do we actually push stuff in one end? And hold your breath for a very long time, a couple of years, maybe it actually comes out and maybe you get an RFC number out of it. Like we were seeing in chat, that's one of the things that people find is a difficult thing about IETF is how do we actually set expectations and more importantly, realize that sometimes the processes we've set up are one of the things that's an obstacle for people to participate. Next slide. So, my intention here for standing up in front of you, asking for a little bit of time, is to talk about the, managing the complexity. The chairs are one of the key shepherding points and points of contact for new participants for new work. This is one of the things that's challenging about seating a new chair, especially for existing technology. They need to be well versed in it, but they have to have an awful lot of soft HR type skills as part of their job. And quite frankly, and one of the things that we're always uncomfortable talking about, but it's very relevant, strong political skills. And this becomes a very relevant thing. We're also the front point for managing a lot of the friction points in the IETF process. Clearly, the ISG takes an awful lot of that work for us, and they get the much harder things at the end of the pipeline. But this is the chair's forum, so the question to you, and maybe a tiny bit of microphone time if there's any available, is what can we do about trying to reduce this complexity? What can we do to compress the pipeline? How do we help with onboarding by making it easier to see how IETF actually works? That was it.
Okay. Greg? And when Greg's coming, we have like 3 minutes, so.
Yeah, just a real quick note to say, appreciate this presentation. A lot of the issues that you raised are really, really important, particularly the one about working group chairs being key touch points, particularly for potential or new participants. So would love to continue this conversation, maybe on the list.
Okay. Anything else on this presentation? Thank you, Jeff. Durav mentioned this at the very beginning. EODIR is meant to be a coordination of things that other people are doing. So if there are specific things that you think you can do to help, please come forward to the EODIR and we'll see if we can help provide the framework. The last thing on the agenda was actually me talking about tutorials. I've decided to punt that, and if anybody is interested in a discussion about how tutorials might be reintroduced to the IETF, process tutorials or technology tutorials, just drop me an email and it's not what the tutorials would be, but it's how to create a framework so that people can provide tutorials in an appropriate manner. So with that, we are actually at time. So I'd rather close this meeting. If there's anything that you really wanted to bring to any other business, perhaps you could send it to the mailing list, because we need to clear the room for the next meeting. So with that, everybody have a lovely day. Don't forget to take your lunch remains with you, and see you next time.
Yeah.
Mostly Jay.